Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents How to Be a Badass Detective 3 by Michael Anderle, narrated by Dara Rosenberg. Chapter 1. His name was Viator Celis, and although he was 1,648 years old, he still lived within the book that bore his name. The tome was the body that clothed and housed his immortal spirit. But soon, he knew there would again be an opportunity to have a real human body. And then he could achieve things beyond what any human being alive today could conceive. He was born in the ancient city of Adana in what is now Turkey in the year 374 CE. At the time of his birth, Adana lay within the Eastern Roman Empire. When he was 21 years old, the empire split in two. Thereafter, he lived in the land called Byzantium. It was around the time this great civilizational shift occurred that Celis began his study of the arts of magic. He had continued his studies, had continued his pursuit of the craft, his magnum opus, continuously until the present year of 2022. Resting within the book, he waited, and his mind wandered, then focused, then wandered again. His thoughts were never far from what would happen when he once again had a mortal body. So much had changed since the last time he'd had what most people would recognize as a life. It had been but a single century, only one out of the 16 he had lived. But the pace of social and technological advancement had increased to a staggering degree. The world of today was scarcely recognizable compared to the world of 1919, when he had last possessed flesh and blood. During those years of the early 20th century, he had seized control of two bodies in quick succession. The first had been a member of a Serbian secret society called the Black Hand, which was notorious for its role in starting World War I. Viator Celis, in the guise of a young and fanatical Bosnian, had been among those who pushed for the killing of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He had personally spoken to Gavrilo Princip, the chief assassin, urging him to greater heights of fervency. The man he had possessed had seemed insignificant at the time. Celis had desired to be involved in great events, the better to showcase his magic and learn new things from the strife and flux that would result. However, the man and his comrades had proven to be more important than the sorcerer had expected. And so, after the Great War began and things became too difficult for him to handle, he had migrated again. The second time, he had seized the body of a middle-aged Italian woman shortly before her departure to the United States. With him directing her mortal form, she had brought his grimoire on her voyage. Thus, Celis had come to America, and there he had remained for over 100 years. The Italian lady had died unexpectedly of cholera in 1919, and Celis had no choice but to return to the book, his immortal safe haven in times of trouble and uncertainty, and to wait. His last host had willed her possessions to a niece who had no interest in them. And so the grimoire of Viator Celis, one of the greatest albeit most obscure tomes of magical knowledge in the world, had languished in a vault for decades, unread and sealed away from mankind. Until 2020. The niece passed away, and her inherited treasure trove had found its way to an auction house. Celis could have taken control of any of the individuals who had handled the book or dared to open its pages, but he did not. He sensed that it would be better and smarter to wait for the right host to appear. The world was much different now. To understand it and take advantage of it, he would need the help of someone who was not only well-versed in the magic of the 21st century, but was considered the first among equals of its sorcerers. When he had taken the Bosnian man and the Italian woman, he had deliberately chosen individuals who were humble and significant. The former had been a fanatic, and the latter a moderately wealthy person, but otherwise they were unremarkable. Humbled by the Industrial Revolution, Celis had thought it best to lie low until he could learn more about how technology could be combined with magic. Now, as he and the grimoire had emerged again into the light of another century, he grasped that he had been wrong to take such a strange detour. His usual approach, throughout all of history since his first life had neared its end, was to possess people who were important. Not overly visible, perhaps, but persons who were close to the world's centers of power. It was only fitting for a mage of his stature. Viator Celis had waited and watched. The auction house had retained him, safe within his book, and he'd obscurely perceived that someone of significance would purchase him soon. Knowing this, he reposed in silence and reflected on all he had learned about the present day. The industrial age had come and gone with what would have been shocking rapidity in earlier times, but the pace of history had quickened. The world had moved on to the digital age, and technology was almost indistinguishable from magic. Though physically trapped within the tome he had written and consecrated, Celis's mind was capable of following obscure chains of connection to other things and seeing far beyond the confines imposed by his current circumstances. As soon as the executors of the Italian lady's estate took him out of his vault, his consciousness had flowed through and beyond them to other people they knew, and he had been able to see fleeting images of the world beyond. He had heard things and made deductions based on the available evidence. The world's wealthiest and most powerful countries these days, the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Russia, China, and Japan, owed enormous amounts of their power to their investiture in computers and the Internet, which stored and transmitted information in ways that put the most skilled scryers and diviners in history to shame. Grasping this, Viator Celis had summoned what magical resources remained to him, drawn upon his vast astral reserves, as well as the energies woven into the pages of the book, and cast a spell. It was a call, a signal, a cry to be noticed by people who might wish to read his grimoire and would find it interesting, particularly if they were sorcerers skilled in the magic of the digital era. He could not yet be certain the spell had succeeded. More time would be needed to see who answered the call, but he felt certain. Not much more. Soon. Someone would come. Someone with access to the milieu of modern technology, with means and resources that would quickly become Celis's own. Then he would become a magician unlike any in history. Perhaps the greatest of all time. Of course, he would try to avoid starting a war this time around, but mistakes sometimes happened. Kira and Chris had flipped a coin to determine who had to drive the rented car back to downtown Los Angeles. The SUV was smaller than Chris's Jeep, but a lot larger than, and much different from, Kira's motorcycle. He had done all of the driving in the damn thing already so far. It was only fair. "Damn it," Kira had said, then climbed behind the wheel. Chris got into the passenger seat and buckled in. "It's not that long a drive, dear. Granted, everything takes twice as long in LA traffic, but you'll be fine. I can take over around Pomona if you can't deal with it, but it'll be nice to have a short break." Scowling, she shifted to drive and pulled out on the road. Once Kira had gotten into a groove on the highway, quickly adjusting to operating the vehicle, Chris tried to make conversation. He had drunk 2 full cups of coffee with their breakfast, whereas Kira had limited herself to 1. So of the 2 of them, he was feeling more animated. "So," he began, "did you hear anything from Lia? Like any texts or emails? I didn't see anything, but usually if there's agency business, you're the one she contacts. After all, you're technically the CEO. Kira raised an index finger. "Not technically. I am the CEO, but it's a small enough company that I consider everything a group effort. Ugh, I don't even want to think about how badly we would have flubbed all of this stuff recently if it had been just me on my own, or if I had like 1 or 2 employees. But they were people I didn't know, didn't trust, and who were incompetent morons in general. With you and Lia and Steph as my crew, we function a hell of a lot better." "Agreed." Chris stretched his arms and rolled his head around on his neck. "That doesn't answer my question, though. Did you hear from her?" "Oh, right. No," said Kira. "She kept quiet all through our little vacation from vacation. That probably means either that nothing is happening, or that a bunch of stuff has gone down, but none of it was drastic or weird, so she's just chugging along without us until we get back." It occurred to her also that Lia might be worried about disturbing her and Chris after their ordeal. Lia had driven out to Harupa Valley to help with the assault on the Orthodoxy safe house, But she'd gone straight back home to Long Beach once it was over. Kira hadn't given her instructions on whether or not to contact her if something came up. Chris shrugged. Well, she usually does fine. Serious workaholic, though. You should talk, Kira observed. He chortled and rubbed one eye. Yeah, sometimes I can be. But hey, I accompanied you on 2 consecutive vacations and only worked when I had to. I'd allege that it's fair to say I'm not addicted to work. I merely get deep into it when I have a good reason. Right. She frowned as traffic thickened. They were getting into the urbanized part of the Inland Empire by this point. And I appreciate it. If anything, the biggest slacker at our company is me. Stephanie doesn't count since she still works at the Mermaid. When is she going to quit? Chris squinted into the distance. I believe the arrangement was that once we started getting a steady and reliable flow of cases, she would join full-time. Notwithstanding the size of your inheritance, it helps for a business to have actual customers to be able to pay its employees. True. Kira sat in silence for a moment or two. Other thoughts had been churning within her mind over the last couple of days, things she knew were important and would need to be addressed when the time was right. Until this morning, they had not yet found expression in spoken words. I wish, she began, we knew who that woman we took out was, the lead witch from the train, who was trying to sacrifice me and the little girl. Pavla seemed pretty sure it was Milena, who was one of the most senior and powerful members of the Orthodoxy if so, but I'm not positive, and I don't feel great about it. Chris listened, looking at her face as she spoke, and taking in her words with his usual mixture of deep thought and caring acceptance. Kira, he replied. It's a good thing you don't enjoy killing people. It's too bad you've had to do it as many times as you have, but from everything you've told me, as well as everything that I've seen, it was necessary and justified in each case. When you take on bad people and try to save innocent lives, you're going to end up in situations where the choices aren't easy. She knew all that. He hadn't told her anything new. It was nice to hear him say it out loud, though. He went on. I might have killed one person, but I'm not sure. When we were staking out El Pedoquero at the wharf, remember? Lia and I were in the Jeep, and I had to ram that one SUV. One of the guys popped out and tried to shoot us, and we both shot back. I don't know which of us dropped him since we fired at the same time. Part of me hopes it wasn't me, though I'm sure Lia doesn't want the responsibility either. Kira nodded. Chris's sidearm of choice was a .357 Magnum revolver, whereas Lia's was a little .380 pistol. Chris's would have been the deadlier if he had hit his mark. But gunshot wounds were strange things, and in the darkness and chaos, there was no way to make sure. Yeah, she said, I'm just glad all of us are still alive. And that girl Jessica. The thing is, it isn't only the morality of having had to kill her, Milena or whoever she was. There's something else. Chris blinked, surprised. Oh? You can tell me about it if you want. Her nostrils flared as she breathed in and out. Around her, the city buzzed and shone and honked. Traffic was bad, but no worse than usual for the SoCal road system. When I took her down, Kira explained, I felt a lot of magic release. That might not make sense to someone who doesn't have the gift. For one thing, there was the spell she was trying to cast, where as soon as she performed the sacrifice, all my power would have been transferred to her god-awful friends. That one dissipated as soon as she died. But there was more. It was as though a bunch of other enchantments had been buzzing along in the background, and they all fizzled out with her death. I think that by removing her from the picture, I screwed the Orthodoxy pretty badly. Everything she had seen so far suggested that the members of the Orthodoxy were awful people. The coven operated more like an organized crime ring than a society of casters, and yet... So? Chris inquired. Why do you feel bad about that? Not trying to, invalidate your feelings. I ask because I'm confused. It seems like screwing them over would be a good thing. Kira grimaced, staring straight ahead. In most regards, yes, but remember, they're at war with a certain other group. I'm worried that by weakening them, I handed an advantage to those fucking council people. Her hands tightened on the wheel. Her knuckles turned white and she clenched her jaw. "You know," she added, "the ones who were hunting me. The bastards who stole the Kim's magic from them and would have done the same thing to me unless I had agreed to bow down before them." Chris quipped. "Ah, I remember. Makes more sense now." "I hope they both lose," Kira snapped, not trying to hide her bitterness. "The world might be a better place if all of them shut the hell up and went away and left everyone else the fuck alone." Chapter 2. Stephanie inhaled deeply, and when she let the breath out, it took the form of a sigh. She leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. It was only early afternoon, but it had already been a long day. She was at Lia's house in Long Beach, which was a decent drive from her home near downtown, not to mention from Kira's place. They had been talking about having Lia move closer to the center of the city, or perhaps renting a company office equidistant from all of them so that no one had to fight LA traffic for an extended period to come to work. So far, they were making do. Steph turned her eyes and hands back to the laptop's keyboard to resume her work. A moment later, the door rattled. Then someone turned a key in the knob, opened it, and stepped in. "Hi," she called. "Lia?" A soft voice responded. "Yes, of course. Thank you for covering for me." Her heels clacked on the floor as she walked into the kitchen, out of Stephanie's line of sight. It sounded like she was carrying a big paper bag, presumably filled with food. Steph had only had a banana for breakfast, and she admitted to herself there was no way she would skip lunch. "No problem. Usually you're the one who works all day, right? You can take a break once in a while." "I suppose." Lia opened the bag. "But I feel mildly ashamed, as ridiculous as that might sound. I got us some sandwiches if you're interested. Since you said you didn't want a break today, you might as well eat something on the job." Steph figured there was no point in disguising her enthusiasm. "Damn, Lia, you didn't have to do that, but I'm not complaining." "Thanks. What kind?" She got up, went to the kitchen, and saw that her friend had purchased a tray of miniature sub-sandwiches with a variety of meat, cheese, and vegetable options. Steph, not being a picky eater, sampled a little of everything. "To be honest," she confessed, "I was reconsidering the whole not taking a break today thing just based on caloric needs or whatever. I haven't been using magic much, but I think my metabolism's still higher than it used to be." Lia poured herself a glass of juice to go with her light meal. "That could be. From what you and Kira have said in the past, I gather that as you advance as a caster, you begin to subconsciously run passive magical processes that consume a small amount of your energy, like how a computer still draws a little bit of power when you leave it idling or in sleep mode." Steph nodded. "Something like that. I feel like my mind wanders, only it gets places, instead of just running in circles in my head, if that makes sense. Makes me suspect that I'll be at Kira's level eventually in terms of all the stuff I can do with my mind. I think she's still stronger than me overall, though, so maybe not." "I wouldn't know," Lia replied. "Still, you both have extraordinary talents. Now, back to work. Have we gotten more requests? That's a stupid question. Of course we have. It's only a matter of how many and how serious they are." Stephanie shuddered. It was true. At some point in the recent past, neither of them was sure when, word about their agency and its exploits had spread on the internet and attracted the wrong sort of attention. It was not merely that they had been involved with 2 separate serial killing sprees, as well as a major art theft and a child abduction. No, those things, as sensational as they might be, were still within the realm of normality. The problems had begun when someone put out the word that McDonough Investigations dealt with paranormal matters. The crazies had all come out of the woodwork, along with the spammers and trolls. "Yeah," said Steph, "plenty of bullshit." She sat down at her laptop, which was on a table a short way from Lia's desk in the front corner of the living room. Then she checked her email. "Ugh, this is the 8th Yeti-related request I've gotten today. Can't be more than 1 or 2 of those the work of legitimate wackos. The rest are probably kids on the internet who thinks it's hilarious to waste our time." Lia balked. "Yetis? Abominable snowmen? In Los Angeles? People are even stupider than I thought. Or they think they're clever." Stephanie sifted through the results. Oh, and here's one asking if we can clairvoyantly, his word not mine, kill his ex-wife by causing her car to crash or something like that. I didn't know detective agencies hired out hitmen, psychic or otherwise. Lia munched a sandwich and washed it down with juice. I and Johnny and Sven could provide him with contacts who might be useful to him, but let's not. We need to stay on the right side of the law. Especially me, given my history. Right. Steph kept her eyes on the screen. This one is kind of interesting. Something about a magical book at an auction. It belonged to a dead lady. Lia snapped her fingers as she struggled to finish chewing. Mark that one, she said after swallowing. It sounds like something Kira would be into. And if it involves a book, particularly one that is confirmed to exist, it might take us in the direction of high-class stolen property. Those are the cases we need to pursue. Maximum profit and prestige, minimum danger, and shady reputation. Stephanie had bookmarked it by the time Lia finished speaking. I was thinking the exact same thing. The two women shared the task of filtering the remainder of the emails and phone messages their business had received. In addition to the mountainous piles of spam, there was a smattering of legitimate requests for help from people who seemed serious and would likely be able to pay for the agency's services. When Lia took over the job of evaluating the remainder of the missives, Stephanie shifted her focus to determining when they might be able to speak to each customer to discuss their case. At first, it was a rote act of examining their schedule, trying to guess how much time it would take to consult with each person, and placing things in a sensible order. After she took a minute to sit back, finish her lunch, and examine the big picture, something clicked in her mind. Damn, we're turning out to be a solvent business after all. We've got like 10 or so good customers lined up. It will be up to Kira to decide how much we charge them and that sort of thing, but I think we're over the line as far as knowing we can succeed at this. Which means I can start working for Kira full-time. No more waiting tables, even though the mermaid ain't all bad. She rubbed her eyes and looked sidelong at her coworker. Hey, Lia? Lia raised her eyebrows and responded, yes, without looking away from her PC. So far, I'm counting 10 cases that seem legit. If you remember what we talked about before, when Kira was asking when I was going to quit my day job, I'd say the time has come. We got enough customers to turn a profit for at least the next few months, and that will give us enough of a reputation to get more. Right? Lia stopped typing and turned to her friend. I hadn't thought of it that way, but yes, I believe you're right. When making a major decision, if you have a gut feeling that it's the correct decision, sometimes it's better to finalize it right away instead of waffling over the details and allowing inertia to keep you where you are. If you want my advice, compose your 2 weeks' notice today and turn it in next time you're at work. Insofar as Kira wouldn't refuse to hire you, you could technically quit on the spot, but that, Steph finished for her, would be a badass move. Kevin's a good guy to work for, and I wouldn't do that to him. Not to mention Jen and the newer folks would get screwed over and have to pick up the slack until they found someone else. Lia nodded and turned back to her screen and keyboard. It's up to you, but it sounds like you have the right idea. Okay then, Stephanie concluded. As soon as I finish this itinerary, I'll type up my formal letter of resignation. Guess I would call the bar and accomplish the same thing, but I'm moving up in the world, so I might as well start doing things the professional way. 10 minutes later, she opened a word processor program, found a template online for the type of letter she was aiming for, and got to work. She snickered to herself as she opened with, "To whom it may concern," feeling vaguely ridiculous for using such a pretentious phrase. It sounded nice, though. She wondered if Kevin would be impressed or flattered that she was treating his humble business as though it were a large, respectable company. Toward the end of the composition, Lia interrupted her to ask, "Could you send me the link to that bookcase? I'm caught up with everything else, and I'd like to review the information before we present it to Kira. She and Chris are supposed to be back sometime today." "Sure." Steph paused in her writing and sent the link to Lia via email. While her coworker perused the info, she finished her letter, skimmed it for errors, saved it, and sent it to the printer. As she was returning to her seat with the freshly printed sheet of paper, Lia said, This is interesting." Stephanie diverted from her path and stopped behind Lia's shoulder. "Yeah, seemed like it. I didn't have time to read everything, though. What all did you find?" Lia had 3 tabs open, one her email. The one displayed on the screen was from a message board. "Here," she indicated, pointing. "We have the handle of the guy who sent the email. He said that his mother used to talk about her friend, a Mrs. Manfredini, who supposedly possessed an ancient or possibly medieval era spellbook she swore was haunted. She kept it in a vault and died not too long ago. He emailed me, saying he probably can't afford to purchase the book, but he might be able to pay us to investigate the matter. He claims to have no real agenda. It's just something he's always been curious about. He made this post on a discussion board over 2 years ago, so he's consistent. And he did not just make the story up yesterday as a prank." Steph nodded. "Yeah, that's the impression I got. Still, do we have independent verification that the thing exists?" "Yes." Lia clicked on the third tab. "Here we have an auction site which is offering the book in question. I checked them out, and they're a very staid, prim establishment with a good reputation, so it's not as though it's only listed on a snake oil fishing site that delivers cheap Chinese knockoffs 4 months later than scheduled or anything like that." Laughing, Stephanie responded, "Well, glad you did your homework. What does it say?" The book they saw was called The Grimoire of Universalis. It had been up for auction previously but had not found a buyer. It would be available for sale starting tomorrow evening. The starting price was set at $5,000. It was considered a rare collectible, and the auction house did not expect it to sell for any less than $10,000. Gah! Steph was aghast. I mean, Kira has that kind of money, doesn't she? Still a hell of an operating expense, seeing as how the guy who wants us to check it out probably can't pay more than that. Lia ran her fingers through her long black hair. "Yes, if Kira decides to take the case, we may end up having to wait for someone to buy it and then approach the new owner the right way to get them to allow us to examine it. However, there's one further wrinkle which is alluded to here." The book's listing politely avoided any lurid details, but it mentioned that it had a history, and that rumors about its supposedly supernatural qualities had circulated over the years. Naturally, the auctioneers played that up as part of the item's mystique and as an element of its historical significance. There's more, though. Leo went back to the forum and scrolled down to reveal more of the conversation between the one guy's introductory post. It seems that a couple other people have heard of the grimoire, and here's where it starts to get weird. The legends have it that the book is a conduit for malevolent spirits that can possess anyone who reads it. Steph gave an appreciative nod. Shit. Possess as in, like, demonic possession taking over their body? Apparently. Lia scrolled onward. There are other fairly ridiculous stories we can likely dismiss, such as that the book was involved in setting off World War I in Europe. As for the possession thing, I'm inclined to be skeptical, but being around you and Kira has, shall we say, opened my mind to new possibilities. That, Steph thought, is a mild way of putting it. Most people aren't ready for how many things in the world are real that they always figured were made up, or something crazy people hallucinated. Hell, it took me a while to accept it all. She shook her head and waved a hand. Well, Kira can review it herself when she's back. Sounds a little spicier than what she wants to move toward since we've gotten caught up in a lot of difficult, nasty stuff lately, but you know how she is. Can't stay away from trouble, like she thinks she's the only one who can deal with it. Lia said nothing, but the faint wry smile on her face suggested she understood completely. Both women returned to their separate endeavors. About 10 minutes later, someone knocked on the door. Steph rose first to answer it and recognized the familiar figures of Kira and Chris on the doorstep. She opened the door and smiled. Hey there, strangers. Welcome back. Hi. Kira's voice was ragged as she gave off a definite air of grumpiness, as though something was bothering her. Long drive. I had to do most of it myself, but Chris took over after we stopped at my place. Yeah, her boyfriend confirmed. I probably shouldn't have put it up to its coin toss. Kira's more out of practice than I am when it comes to driving things that have more than 2 wheels. Stephanie gestured at the sandwich tray, telling them to help themselves to the leftovers if they wanted, then told them there were business updates to discuss once they were ready. Great, Kira muttered. Chris gave her an odd look. He had heard enough of her concerns that he understood why she might still be dealing with a mixture of stress and guilt. but it bothered him that she was being so crabby at a time when all was well.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?